How do I get this in next to the damn?
Welcome to the committee meeting for October 16th. We all please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, good evening, everybody. Our first item of business is to hear and consider members for a building committee, Beach Smith Richardson Clubhouse Building Committee. There's a lot of people for this committee. I want to see if we can get through this quickly. If you hear your name and you're being nominated for consideration, can you please rise just so we can identify a face with a name? Edna Albrecht, is she here? No. Christopher Kotos? Hi, welcome. Craig Curley? No. Don DiMartino? Hi, Don. Frank Geiger? Hey, Frank. Tamara Guarino? Hi. Jeffrey Hendrickson? Welcome. Kimberly Marshall? No. Brian Nareau? Hey, Brian. Hal Schwartz, let me know he couldn't be here this evening. And Jack Slane. Thank you. Does anybody have any questions for any member of the Golf Commission who's being considered for appointment at this time? Seeing none, thank you all very much for being here. We vote on Monday. Next item of business. To hear a report from the Joint Retirement Investment Board. Mr. Vahey, welcome. Right here. Thank you.
Good evening. In your packet, you have the last fiscal year's report from both the Joint Investment Board and the OPEB. You'll see that as of June, it was like $366 million, I believe, in the joint fund, and 33 million, roughly 30 million in the OPEB. Those numbers have now increased to about 383 and 37, so about 410 million roughly as of last month end. Return-wise, we beat the benchmark, which is an internal generated benchmark, which consists of subsets of all the asset classes. So that's a good year. We can see also that over the this gives us 7 in the 5-year periods also, we've generated returns that are in excess of the targeted discount rate that the fund's supposed to achieve. As far as any major changes in the funds in the past year, we're actually moving out of 2 of the 3 hedge funds. One because DGAM, which is listed, actually closed. It was bought by Carlyle. They were not having success marketing the fund and decided to shut it down, which is fine with us. And then Canadas has been in the news recently as its hedge fund manager, the head guy, has decided to run for governor, and so he's closing the fund. So we're getting our money back by December from that fund. And I believe since the last time we were here, there's something new on the list called absolute return. It's on the second page there. You see the Invesco MAC. That was a replacement for DGAM, the hedge fund, in that it's like a hedge fund, lower fees, a little bit more liquidity. So it's likely to get more money now that 2 hedge funds have closed. And then otherwise, on the personnel front, we've had a fair amount of turnover, probably certainly on the employee representatives. We've had quite a few come through for various reasons, and then a couple of the main appointed people as well. But it's good. We got some good new blood on the board. Are there any questions?
Great. Does anybody have any questions for Mr. Vahey?
Here, one quick.
Yes, Representative McCarthy.
Tom McCarthy, District 7. Brian, quickly, do you have a rule of thumb of debt to equity in terms of composition of the fund?
Debt to equity, it's generally like a 60-40. Well, OPEB is more 70-30 because we can't, it's so small that we don't qualify for the same investment mix that we do with the larger one. So it's pretty much S&P 500 and our fixed income manager, so it's 70-30, but the other one's 60-40. Although, real estate, I kind of would toss it in the sort of fixed income-like investment. So when you look at the mix, it's not just bonds and stocks. We've got alternatives there
Yeah.
as well.
Okay, that's kind of what I thought. I was just curious.
That's as compared to our peers, which would be the 100 to 500 million public funds. We're probably lighter on equity exposure than most. So a lot of times you'll read, that's the in thing to do now that the markets are great. Everybody's publishing what their returns were. And you'll see our numbers a little lower than everybody else's, but it's primarily because we don't have the equity exposure. So if things go badly, they won't be publishing the returns, but you'll probably see the Fairfield plan outperforming them in rockier markets.
Understood. Thanks.
Representative Walk?
Jay Walk, District 5. Thank you, Mr. Vahey, for coming tonight and joining us. Anyway, on page 3, just a question because I'm not understanding.
Is your speaker on, Jack? I can't hear this.
Speak up.
There's no amplification.
There's no, you don't even bother. You just have to speak loud.
Yep, what's your question?
All right, so anyway, on page 3, where it says hedge fund. So we go back to the.
I didn't think we needed to use it.
I know something.
We don't have the little table.
Not all.
Oh, gotcha.
Question on the hedge
We
funds.
don't have that little table. Question on the hedge fund. Going back to the hedge funds ex Madoff settlement.
Yes.
So, did the town settle? We settled. Okay, so I'll ask you. What does that mean?
We don't, the return, so when we got the money back, that would have juiced our returns. 'Cause as the money came in, it's bumped up our longer-term returns, but they've been settled a long time ago, but they would skew our return numbers.
So the settlement came from his estate, whatever. Where did the money come from that they settled with? I mean, it
We
was
settled the
like $4
lawsuits.
million.
We had lawsuits against various parties, they all settled.
It was also okay. Thank you.
Any further questions? Seeing none, thank you very much for being here this evening, Mr. Vahey.
Thank you.
Next, the item on the agenda are the amendments to 4 cell tower leases. I see Attorney Lesser is here.
Good evening, all. We have 4 extensions to cell phone leases that are up for renewal. And before I get started, there are corrections to 2 of them. There's numbers that have to be changed. So why don't I just go over those real quickly first. I don't know if you all have them in your packages, but
We do.
okay, so there's a 4th amendment to lease, which is the one with Singular Wireless PCS LLC. And on page 2, paragraph number 4, the base rent should be increased to $57,706.93. And that's the only change on that one.
I'm sorry, which lease was that? New Singular
It starts
Wireless?
it's, at the very top, it says 4th Amendment to lease,
Oh, okay, yes, I'm
and
sorry.
that's the one with new Singular Wireless PCS.
Gotcha, and which paragraph was it?
Paragraph 4, page 2, the base rent should go to $57,706.93. And on the one that starts off, First Amendment to and restatement of lease agreement, and that is with T-Mobile Northeast. The first page, the rent should go to annually $46,330.44. payable $3860.87 per month, and the escalator is 5%, not 3.
All right, can you just send us revised copies, and I'll get
Sure.
them out to the...
I just wanted you to know that. 3 of the 4 leases,
Stan, can you repeat those numbers? I'm sorry, some of our
Sure.
reps didn't catch them.
on the one that's entitled First Amendment to and Restatement of Lease Agreement for T-Mobile Northeast, paragraph 2, 46,330.44, payable $3860.87 per month, and then the annual increase is 5%. What we did on these leases, and 3 of the 4, I believe it's the 3 other than Cellco, so we have Cellco, T-Mobile Northeast, Sprint Spectrum, and New Singular. The 3 other than Cellco, we had sold the right to collect the rent 10 years ago. I think under Ken Flato's administration, they sold it for a fixed sum. Those sales are over, and the income is reverting to the town, so we will start collecting that income now. And what we did was, we kept to the same lease, we kept to the same base rent as the last rent that they paid, and the same escalator. So just, all these leases continue to escalate every year. So, Peter?
What, we just got a lump sum payment
Yeah,
at that time,
yes.
but now it reverts to us?
Now we're collecting monthly. We have the leases back.
Thank you.
Representative Jones.
District 6. What is the term with extensions for the Sprint? I'm trying to follow it. I know it expires April 30th, 2017, and then there's a 60-month, 5-year new term, and then there are 4 5-year renewals? Is that correct?
It's retroactive to May of this year, and the first term is 5 years, and
Right.
there are 4 additional 5-year terms.
So that
So
brings us out
it could
to...
go out 25 years.
Right. That's a very long term. And I noticed that only the tenant, there's an automatic renewal unless the tenant provides written notice. So we basically have no right to terminate this lease, and it's a very long term.
That's correct.
Does that give you any concern?
No, not at all. We're above market pretty much on all of these leases, and it's going to continue because we have good escalators in all of them. So the
why
rent
would
just
we
keeps
give
going
up
up.
our right to terminate, especially in that long a term?
Because there's no need, because it's really advantageous to us to have a long lease with an escalator in it. We couldn't get this kind of rent if we were starting from scratch now. They're paying less.
No, I understand I do these kind of contracts for a living. I understand automatic renewals, but I'm just talking about in a long-term lease giving up, where one party completely gives up the right to terminate over such a long period of time. Who knows what could happen?
Typical in commercial leases, the option is on the part of the tenant. They have the option. So we've given them the right to lease this for 25 years.
Is this, this appears to be much longer a term than the others.
The others were 15. Pretty much uniformly 15 years.
Anybody else?
Thank you
Seeing
all.
none, thank you very much. Next item is the Port Security Grant. Welcome, Chief. Welcome, Lieutenant.
Good evening. With me is Bob Palomares, Lieutenant in charge of, among other things, our Marine unit. So just to kind of give an overview of our Marine unit for those of you who might not be aware of it, we've basically, the police department has had a footprint on the Sound for the better part of 50 years. And we obviously use a variety of different assets to get that, to accomplish the tasks we have to. Traditionally, we have a larger vessel and then a smaller vessel that was town-funded over the years. In 2009, we applied for a port security grant that awarded us a replacement for our large vessel, and that was in 2009, and that was a $488,000 grant to get that large vessel in 2009. That replaced the large vessel that we had that was obviously end of life for a marine asset. 2015, some of you might recall because it's a little more recent, we applied for and received another grant, and this grant was in the amount of $289,000, and that allowed us to replace our smaller vessel. That required a kick-in from the town to provide for that grant, and if you recall, we were able to kind of work through our budget that we had at the time to make those decisions to get the grant and invest a little bit of time, a little bit of our own money to get that grant. We now applied for, recently we've applied for a sustainment grant, and that's why we're here tonight. We applied for a sustainment grant of $81,000 to sustain our larger vessel. And by sustainment, I mean sustain maintenance in it, but the biggest reason we applied for it was to replace the 3 engines that are on it. It's a 2009 vessel, meaning that the engines are currently about, well, that would make them about 8 years old. And this is a 3-year grant. We applied for the grant, we were awarded the grant, and as a result, we were able to get the replacement of those 3 engines within a 3-year time frame. We're probably not going to replace them until the end of the grant, obviously to get 3 more years out of the engines. But as such, this grant requires a town match. And the town match over a 3-year period is 25%, which comes out a little bit above $20,000. We traditionally, out of our operating budget, to maintain the boats that we have, or that large boat, spend about $6,000 to maintain that throughout the year anyway. So if we take that $6,000 that we're spending anyway and apply that to the grant, we're going to match and meet that 25% cost that we have, that the town has to match. So basically, I'm before you just to indicate that we want to accept the grant, but it's going to require us to pony up 25%, which we can do through our operating budget over those 3 years. Now, I know that the operating budget for next year is not set, but traditionally, we spend those costs to maintain the boat anyway.
Anybody have any questions? Representative Way.
So am I correct in what I'm hearing is that there will be nothing that will be asked from us really from the town budget? That you're saying the maintenance money over the 3-year period will pretty much, well, that would only be 18,000, right?
Well, roughly 6,000. So it's you know, whether or not it's 6,200 a year, what I'm saying is we allocate money in our operating budget every year to maintain all of our assets. Some of the money we allocate is to maintain the vessels. So I don't anticipate that we'd be coming back for a large ask for any additional funding. We have to make priorities. If we didn't get this grant, I anticipate probably in 3 years, we'd be coming back to say we need to replace 3 engines on that large vessel. So I don't anticipate there to be any ask above and beyond what we're talking about today.
Thank you.
Representative McDermott.
Through you, Madam Moderator, to Chief McNamara. I'm just looking at the cost of the engine, $16,000 and change for 300 horsepower engines. I know a friend of mine just replaced 2 of his engines, which were 350, which were $30,000 each. I'm just wondering if that price is right and where we got those numbers from.
So we get those numbers from the government cost is different than what a consumer cost. So that would be significantly less than a civilian just going out buying.
Okay.
Tell them we got a couple extra money.
I could use a new engine myself.
Anyone else? Yes, sure. Representative Durrell.
Alex Durrell, RTM. How many gallons of gas do these boats use over the summer, and what do you guys pay for a gallon of gas for these boats?
So not having that off the top of my head, I'm going to wonder and ask if Lieutenant Calamaris might have that.
I have a pretty close estimate. Well, first of all, we don't pay tax on our gasoline, so it's significantly lower than what civilians, it's government rate.
Is it diesel?
It is not diesel, it's gasoline. It burns about, top speed, it burns about 70 gallons per hour. It's very rarely going top speed. When we tow vessels, you might use a little bit more fuel. To say what we go through per year, I couldn't give you a number off the top of my head. I couldn't give you a number. But I can get you that number.
Anyone else? Anyone else before I go back to Rep. McDermott? Go ahead, sir, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. I just have a question. A constituent asked me the other day while I was canvassing that he thinks we have a flotilla. What are the other assets that we have? I think we're 2 jet skis or...
So, yeah, oftentimes that question comes up as to, how many assets do we have? Why do we have the assets that we have? And what are the training requirements? I know that has been a discussion, that somehow the police department is building a fleet, a navy of some sort. And that's why kind of in the beginning I wanted to give everybody that background so you understand it. 50 years we've had a presence on the Sound. And so, like I said, our main asset is the big vessel. Now that vessel comes with a little bit of a requirement on our part. The government gave it to us, recognizing back, trying to buy down risk, recognizing that the town of Fairfield sits really next to a big port and the ferry that goes back and forth, and there's a lot of activity there. So the federal government said, look, you can have this boat, use it at your will, but at the same time understand that you may have to help us if we ever were in need of crisis, which is important too. There's town residents that utilize that ferry, and there's other people that enjoy the Bridgeport area, so you want to make sure that we contribute and we have a presence there. Our smaller vessel, same thing. It provided it from the federal government, and that allows us to get closer to the shore and into some of the areas that the larger vessel just couldn't get to. That has, I believe it has sonar on the side of it that was in addition to that, and that, frankly, has come in useful and handy for us tragically during some of the incidents that we've been called to assist on the Sound. We also have 2 jet skis that over time we acquired. That is the extent of our vessels. The vessels that we have do not require any specialized training by our police officers, by our marine officers. They are trained in how to operate the boats, but there's nothing significant that accepting that federal government asset required us to do anything but that. So it's really been a maintaining the presence that we've had on the Sound, recognizing that it gets a lot of activity. Tragically, we've had a lot of calls out there this year where people have lost their lives. I know there's been a few times when we've rescued people. And I think in the last week, there's been 3 vessels that have struck the reef. So we're getting quite a little bit of demand from our vessels. But in no way, shape, or form are we trying to build a navy or build our assets to the point where they're not functioning. So, but I do appreciate you asking.
Somebody asked me, so
No, I'm glad.
just wanted to have
It's good to have the opportunity.
answer for the next time.
I know, it's good to have the opportunity to
It's the
explain.
Irish
Thank you.
Armada.
Thank you. Any further questions? Representative Perugini.
Yeah, Bill Perugini, District 9. Just one follow-up question on the outboards. So what's the typical life expectancy of those engines in hours? And how many hours do we have on them today? Since I'm sure you don't know that off the top of your head, but can you get back on that?
Sure. Yeah, I think, I don't have the number of the hours that are on it currently, but I do know that they are 8 years old now. The grant is 3 years old, meaning that we have to spend the money to purchase the engines within a 3-year period. That doesn't mean we have to put them on the boat within that 3-year period. We have to purchase them. So our plan is to purchase the engines at the end of that 3-year life and then hold off as far as we can until the engines need to be replaced. But generally, you're talking, a 10 to 12-year lifespan of the engines. Beyond that, you just want to make sure that it is an emergency vehicle, even though it is a marine asset. It's still an emergency vehicle, so we want to ensure that it is that they do have the best equipment on them as they can.
Yeah, no, we appreciate their services. It's been a busy year.
Yes.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Seeing none, thank you very much. Next item on the agenda is the CDBG DR transfer to Riverside Drive. Mr. Carey.
Good evening.
Good evening, sir.
So this is a pretty routine, actually not routine, but we're transferring money from an existing grant that wasn't going to go forward because of funding restriction from the Army Corps of Engineer. There was a $300,000 grant to study Pine Creek dike improvements, but it required a funding, associated funding from the Army Corps of Engineer that they are not going to participate in because it exceeded their budgetary amount. It would have had to get a congressional approval. So we were able to reprogram the grant for something that was already actually in the capital water flow chart. And that project is the design and replacement of the tide gate system at the Turney Creek outfall on Riverside Drive. So the town is going to go out to bid and get the investigation and design work done so that we can move that project forward, which is already slated for replacement.
Excellent. Representative Wackerman.
Karen Wackerman, District 7. Thanks for doing this.
Yep.
I know that this affects a lot of my constituents. So once the plan is in place, what's your estimate about how long it will be before it gets?
So probably spring of 2019, it would require funding for construction through the town, so that would have to be approved. We've already actually gone out to bid for the project, and that project will be awarded. So if we start in November, we're looking at basically a fall of 2018 to have, we're hoping, permitting and design completed. It's about 9 to 10 months to get through that process.
Thank you very much.
Representative Farnan.
Thank you, Brian Farnan, District 9. I am also supportive of this. This does affect a fair amount of my constituents. My only concern is regarding this typo from the Department of Housing for the 200,000 versus 300,000.
Yep.
Is there any way before next week's meeting that we can get some kind of like clarified letter from them to?
Yeah, that's actually happened once before too, and I will try to get clarification from that with the letter. This was done as an amendment to the existing Riverside Drive resiliency plan, which was actually completed. So they're actually moving the money over that way. So I will try to get clarification from that. I actually were trading calls with the project manager at Department of Housing last night.
Thank you very much.
Anyone else? Representative Sudman.
I have 3 questions. Why didn't we get congressional approval?
The Army Corps, and this is my brief understanding of it again, so every year they have a list of projects that they will go for congressional funding, and I believe it needs to exceed $5 million for them to bring it to congressional, and they already had a list of projects that were in the kitty, and they basically said to us that it's not an option to go forward with it. And the total study, and I'd have to talk to Joe Michelangelo because he was actually handing it. It was exceeded of that. So by the time in years, it would take a couple of years to get that type of congressional funding. This grant would expire. We would use it. That's why the decision was made to kind of deal with something that's an immediate issue rather than go forward with that.
Will we ever have the opportunity again, or?
I think, anyone can always propose something to the Army Corps. It's whether or not they're willing to take up their side of the funding. So I don't think the need has been replaced. I just think it wasn't the right time, and the timing associated with this grant is not working. So I think those conversations are still going to happen, but just because of this grant needs to be spent by 2019. And there was no way to do that with the Corps operates, unfortunately, in large, long-term budget congressional. And also, they'll come back to us and say, the environment for this right now is not right. And it's not going to happen, so.
Was this brought up with flooding erosion?
Yes. Yeah, Dick,
The head of flood and erosion control actually spoke at the Board of Finance in support of this, right next to me when we were there last week.
I didn't see it in the minutes, but I'll check. Okay.
This was in the Riverside Drive resiliency plan. This was actually the second recommendation that came out of the plan. We're trying to take those things off.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Anyone else? Seeing none, thank you.
Thank you.
Next item is the Communication Workers ECC Union Contract. Mr. Hipson is here.
Good evening, Emmett Hipson, Director of Human Resources. I'm here to present an MOA that was reached between the town and the communication workers, which are our dispatch workers. There's 9/11 operator dispatchers. It's essentially a 5-year contract going back to July 1/14, its beginning date, so it was expired for a couple of years, and it'll expire on June 30th, 2019. Most of the changes that were made were on the financial lines. The wages are 2% a year for each of the years. You'll have also seen that there was a separate settlement agreement and a general waiver, so they're no longer going to be doing an average wage, and they'll no longer be able to swap days, and then in exchange, the employees will get time and a half when they work holidays on Thanksgiving, Christmas, and New Year's Day. Healthcare, we changed the plan from a current POS to a revised POS, which has increased co-pays. Those are the same plans that fire has, police has. We've moved over the nurses and PETA already, and if this contract goes through, ECC. They're currently paying 11% on the healthcare cost share. That's going to 13% upon ratification, and then another 0.5% increase to 13.5% on the July 1, 2018. From a bargaining unit perspective, this bargaining unit has 14 members. They work around the clock. They work a 6-day work week, so they work 4 on, 2 off. And from a healthcare perspective, they have 1 person doesn't take it, 7 are in single only, 1 is in employee plus 1, and then 5 are in family. So the healthcare costs are the lowest of any of the bargaining units on an average. It's about $14,000 on average total. That includes employee and employer portion. So, any questions?
Representative Ambrose.
Peter Ambrose, District 1, the 2% increase, I mean, it seems like a norm nowadays. Every contract that comes before us have we contemplated a CPI increase or any other increase that can try to perhaps be more relevant in today's?
So we get, I used to put them into the memos that I did, but I didn't put it in this one. CCM provides us with an update of the entire state and what the increases are. I can tell you that 2% is what we're shooting for, and 2% is below the state average by about 0.5% for negotiated rates, and even below the arbitrated rate. The arbitrated rates, and I can get you the data again. I think I put it in a couple of the memos, so I didn't want to be redundant with it, but we're below what's out there. So we think that 2%, we've been telling our employees that, we're willing to go to 2% because what we're seeing is statewide contracts, salaries increase larger than that.
I just comment that a lot of us would like to see a 2% increase every year in our salaries also, but it's not happening.
Other questions? I have Representative Farnham.
Yes, I'm still concerned at the lack of a move or a serious look at moving to defined benefit plans versus pension. Do you want to stop?
So this bargaining unit moved to defined contribution for all new hires in July 12. So from a position of where they are, they have the lowest pension denominator. So they still are on the old model, which has their first $7,800 reduced down to 1%, and then they don't, then above that, they get the 2.3%. And their health care, they retire, except for 4 grandfathered employees, they retire as the same as active percentages. From a salary perspective, they're one of our lower bargaining units. Their base plus longevity is about $54,000. And even with overtime, they're below 60, except for 1 or 2 of them, they're below 60,000. They work around the clock. We keep a position actually vacant, so this is not one of the bargaining units that we felt we were in a strong position to go to arbitration with, just because they do work around the clock. Their wages are, not, they're low compared to Fairfield County other dispatchers. Quite frankly, they're closer to New Haven County dispatch bargaining units. So we felt we were in a strong position there, and we're just trying to keep that the way it was. But they are, any new employee after 2012 is in defined contribution.
Where are you, where are we with healthcare? I don't feel like we made any movement at all whatsoever. They basically gave us 1.5.
No, the plan design changed. We changed the plan design, which has a 4.1% savings. I'm sorry, I thought so the first year, there is going to be a reduction of about $9,000 or $10,000 in our plan design, and then the second year, it'll be about flat to where it is now. And then we're back into negotiations. So we're keeping healthcare flat. For anyone that retires, except for the 4 grandfathered employees, they're paying the same as actives pay when they retire. So that's as far as we've gotten with any bargaining unit. So and they were already there.
Other question? And what's the average salary of the employee in this group, did you say?
Base and longevity is $53,000.
Other questions? Representative Perugini.
Bill Perugini, District 9. What criteria do you use to hire these individuals? What's their skill mix, educational requirements, background?
They're actually hired by the police department, so they don't actually get hired through human resources. I can tell you that I've done it in other places where I've worked, where I've hired the operators, and they have to go through a series of tests in answering phones, getting collect certified. So the background check is pretty good. It's more than what, not as much as a policeman, but more than the average worker. They have to be collect certified to become a 911 operator, which means they have to be able to access what's called the collect system. It's the emergency system where they have access to motor vehicle records, a number of records the same that the police would have. So it's generally more restrictive and more difficult than just coming into general town government.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Representative Way.
Carol Way, District 5. The salary increases are retroactive to
Yes,
the
ma'am.
beginning year of the contract, which is what year?
July 1/14 is the beginning year of the contract.
Right. However, the increase that they're paying in connection with their insurance is not retroactive, so it really is a bigger increase than just 2%, if you really take that into consideration. And we're already, 3 years into the contract at the time that we're having to approve it? I mean, can't we do something about speeding these things up so that we don't have all of this retroactive stuff for the future?
We're trying to speed things up. I mean, fire, I was able to negotiate fairly quickly. We have Thea, which just expired. We're hoping that we have Thea. Quite frankly, there's 3 remaining openings, so there's 7 total bargaining unit contracts. This will be the 4th one that we completed, and we have 3 remaining open. I would like to bring all 3 of them to you, before the end of the fiscal year. Quite frankly, I'd like to bring them to you by the middle of next spring, hoping to bring, 1 every other month if possible. So,
So we really only get 2 years of the increased payment toward their insurance.
Correct, but then it's negotiated again at that point. And hopefully at this point, we can stay on top of them. This would be the only one that's open in 2019. 2020 and 21, the other contracts are opening.
We need to stay on top of that, and we
Yeah.
can't afford the insurance. They need to contribute more. That need, several years ago, it was an initiative of this RTM to get people into a 401A. We really need to do more to get them to contribute more to healthcare. Other representatives. Representative McCall, then Representative Farnan.
Thank you. You've said a couple times that they work around the clock. Could you address that, the shifts they work, and do they bid for shifts, and is there an incentive to work a certain shift over another?
They do bid for shift. They bid, I believe it's once a quarter. I think the next bid, I think this shift cycle ends January 9th or 10th. The chief's not here, but I believe it's January 9th or 10th. This shift cycle ends. Not so much, there's not really a bonus for working a different shift cycle. They work a 4-on, 2-off, so really they work, weekend, they all work the same number of weekends. It's just a matter of when they fall. So, obviously the more senior people are going to work the day shift, but as it comes to what days they work, that's going to be a rotating basis. So on a 4-2, they all generally will work the same number of weekends as.
But it's their choice, and they bid, so they get to work after a period of time, not round the clock, but on what they would like.
What, I mean, as far as hours, as far as the day hours, I mean, it's the...
No, the shifts, meaning the day shift versus the evening versus the midnights. So
Yeah.
seniority is yes, they want
Yes.
to work days. There are a lot of people that don't want to work days, they want to work a 4 to 12 shift or a midnight shift. So, between the bargaining units, don't you feel like the unit, pretty much, the people get what they want for shifts?
Well, if you're working a 365-day job, I would say they get, they can have at least the ability to, well, the senior people have the ability to work the day shift. I would say that,
Nobody works 365 days. The
No, but
job
in-
is 365 days.
that's,
Okay, thanks.
Representative Way.
I believe that what I read, and correct me if I'm wrong on this, the 4-day shifts are for 2 weeks, and then the next 2 weeks, they're 5-day shifts. And they also are able to swap. with
so
one-
they're 4-2, right? So certain weeks they'll work 4 days, certain weeks they'll work 5 days. Swap was an issue, so we eliminated the swap, and we eliminated...
That's eliminated?
That's eliminated.
Okay.
And we eliminated the average weekly wage. So it used to be they got paid for 37 and a half hours, regardless of the number of hours actually worked in that week, whether it was a 4 or a 5-day week. So we're now paying them for the actual hours they work that week. So if it's 4 days, they'll get paid for 32 hours. If it's 5 days, they'll get paid for 40 hours.
Okay.
Representative Ambrose.
Yeah, Peter Ambrose, District 1. Emmett, there are 3 other contracts that you're going to bring before us within the near future. What are the 3 contracts remaining?
FIA, DPW, and police.
What was the first one?
FIA, town hall employees.
FIA. And when do you expect to present these contracts?
So I have, I would think FIA and DPW will be the first 2 you see, and then I would think police will be the last one that you see, just from where I am in negotiations. Now, that could change based off of a union taking a position, obviously not wanting to, or wanting different terms they're willing to offer. FIA and police both expired this last June 30th, so they're now 2 or 3 months expired, whereas DPW is in the same time frame, I believe, as the ECC. They expire July 14th.
Thank you.
Representative Farnan.
Just to get back to your earlier statement about the fact that we would be in a weak position if we were to reject this contract from the arbitration perspective. Is Connecticut an outlier in the sense that in other states, if the municipality or the government were to reject that contract, it wouldn't per se go to arbitration, that contract would actually be rejected?
it's a minority. I don't know, an outlier. There's, I think, 12 states that have binding R for municipal employees.
Well,
50, yeah, so I don't know whether to consider that an outlier or a minority, I don't know,
Yeah, no,
but it's, the number to it, I believe, is 12.
So I guess where I'm going this is I'd really urge this body to reach out to our Hartford delegation. There's talk right now about certain structural reforms to change these things so that, you see that our partner, the state, is, basically insolvent because it can't handle lots of its unfunded liabilities in a lot of these contracts. So it can't be addressed at this level, but I really do urge all of us to reach out to our delegation to push for those structural reforms so that if we were to reject the contract, maybe this would not be the right way. We would not be stuck going into an arbitration process that, in my opinion, does not favor the taxpayers.
Anyone else? Sure, Representative Durrell.
Alex Durrell, RTM 3. How many man-hours are there in a week? Because at 168 hours a week, 14 people, that comes out to 12 hours per person. I mean, it's got to be more than that.
We cover, so we're not fully staffed. We cover with overtime. There's been a decision not to fully staff this bargaining unit, so there's people working more hours than, as you correctly pointed out. And I think fully staffed is either 15 or 16 employees, and we keep a couple of positions, at least one, but maybe 2 positions vacant.
So there's usually 1 or 2 people working at the same time? Or is more than one person working at the same time? Yes.
Yeah, now, Gary has the actual staffing levels, so I can't, excuse me, Chief McNamara has the staff.
Anybody else? Seeing none, thank you very much. Animal ordinance amendments. Is there anyone here who's a co-sponsor of this item? Heather Dean, Jen Hochberg, Phil Pierce, Brian Farnan, Michael Hurley. Can one of you present on this?
I can do it.
Okay, thank you.
No, I never.
Hi, everyone. This is going to be very short and sweet. A constituent in District 4 came to us several months ago regarding residents not picking up after their dogs. Where he lives, there's a fire hydrant, and many dogs tend to do their business at a fire hydrant or a tree. And it just became, he just was very concerned. So to make a very long story short, we met with Animal Control Officer Paul Miller. We met with Captain Smith of Fairfield Police back in the spring. And here we are. And there's just very few changes, as you see in the ordinance. If you go to 48-1, the sentence where it says, where it starts with including but not limited to parks and school grounds, the end of it says dispose of same in a proper manner. 48-2, under exceptions, it adds or service dog, because there are many folks out there that require a service dog. And 48-3, penalties for offenses, the fine used to be $25. It's been up to $100. Hopefully that will make folks think twice and be more responsible. If there's any questions, please.
So basically, you're increasing the fee if you don't clean up after your animal from $25
That is
to
correct.
$100.
That is correct, Madam Moderator. The concern that did come up in our meeting was enforcement of the ordinance, which is understandable. But I think if everybody, fellow residents and neighbors work together, I think, as I said before, people can be more responsible in picking up after their pets.
Thank you. Questions? Representative Georgiadis.
Drew Georgiadis, District 9.
Yes.
Is there any way to notify people that the fine is greater, either through signage or mailings, or have animal control post something, perhaps tag it to the top of their list, or, I'm not sure, I just want to get the word out see, is there any way to do that?
To change, of the change of the ordinance, such as a
The
press
fee,
release?
to
Oh, the
let
fee.
people know that they're going to be charged $100.
I can find that out.
It would be good to
Yes.
spread the word.
Yes,
actively.
absolutely.
Just speak to the animal control officer and ask them how they'll alert people that the ordinance, if it passes, passed. And
Yes,
Yeah.
I will follow up with that. Thank you.
Other questions? Representative Sundman.
I have several questions I've been thinking about since our last meeting.
Okay.
Because it's a problem in Pine Creek Avenue, French Street, South Patrick Road.
All right.
We have a lot of dog walkers, and I know a lot of the dogs that are on leashes. Many owners let their dogs go on people's property, right? And regularly. So you have sod that's damaged. You have dogs that leave their feces in the street, in people's driveways, on their front lawns, and it's a problem, right? So I understand the goal here is to be more specific in the language in trying to.
That is correct.
And that's, I understand that's the goal. I'm not here to talk about the enforcement, but a question I had about the fine being raised to 100. Do we know why we chose 100? And also, when the group was researching this, did we know how many violations were reported last year by any chance?
I do not have the number of how many violations were reported last year. I can certainly find that out.
I mean, it's just as a question as to like,
That is a good question.
you know, how many people have reported this, how many have actually been fined. Because you know, we could choose any number for a fine, right, and vote on it, but I just wanted to know why did we go to 100? It doesn't matter what the number is, because ultimately, the enforcement's the key.
Yes.
Now, and also communication's the key. How do you communicate this ordinance to the public that they're aware of there's a fine?
Okay.
If they know there's not a police person nearby to see the actual event happen, my other question, what my neighbors have are, can the evidence on video on people's, you know, in homes be used as evidence to police departments to help correct this problem that's ongoing? And can they, I know it's a lot. I met a lot of neighbors this week about the topic. And so we're trying to solve the problem. And you know, and at the beach, people leave the bags on the beach. And we have garbage cans right there. So, you know, you can't monitor everybody.
No, you can't.
But when it comes to the enforcement part and communication, I just wanted to know, you know, like, can you use video for evidence? Can you, how will this be marketed to the public so that people know, okay, wow, well, if I get caught, is it he said, she said, I didn't do this? So that, I mean, it's just, we have a certain problem in our area, so like how this, I don't see it won't really help. So I don't, you know, I mean, I would support it, but I don't know really what the effect will be specifically, say, for our area.
All right. In terms of catching individuals, I can talk with Chief McNamara and see what he has to say. I see nothing wrong with that. I mean, folks seem to be using social media and various means to catch people doing not so good things these days, to be honest. In terms of getting the word out about the change in the ordinance, to answer your question, I think a press release would be in order if it does go through. And in terms of how many violations of this sort happened over the past year, I can certainly find that out as well.
Do you happen to know why the committee chose $100?
Thank you, Madam Moderator. This constituent who contacted us, he was told two different numbers in terms of the fine. One was 25, another was 75, and Representative Pierce, he is currently out of the country on business, so I will do the best I can with this. I think the $100 was just to be consistent, because a lot of fines seem to be, it's 25, but I think the 100 is to make people think, if it happens the first time, people are going to think twice about, I think you know where I'm going with this. People
Using
should
it
be
as
more
a deterrent,
responsible.
right.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I just wanted to, I wanted to say thank you to the committee for
course.
doing this, because it is an important issue.
Absolutely.
But, after speaking with people, it's been, I've been learning more about like what questions, so I appreciate any answers.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Representative McCarthy and then Representative Wall.
Yeah, I think if Representative Pierce were here, he'd remind us that this $25 isn't actually $25 because there's a fee on top of it. So I think it's effectively just under $50, and if you get above a certain bar, and in part, I think that's where the $100 came from. $100 is $100, there's no incremental fee. It's clear what the fine is. My concern is, and I think a number of people said this as well, I don't know if $100 or $50, I don't know if $100 is necessarily a bigger deterrent than $50. My concern is, before we go and raise the fine, because I view this along the lines of a parking violation, which is similar to the 25 plus the fee you get typically. Is raising it to $100 necessarily a deterrent? It's not a deterrent if you're not enforcing it. And so to what extent is it being enforced today, so we make an intelligent decision? Look, people do it all the time, they're fined all the time, but they don't care. I think what we don't know is how often does it happen and how often people are caught, and that's the real reason why it's not going to be any more effective at $100 as it is at 25 if people aren't feeling the pain of abdicating responsibility for their dogs. So I guess that's, before we proceed, I think this is something we have to understand. So, otherwise, we're making a decision in a vacuum. We don't know if in fact $100 will have any effect at all until we have some sense of how often the number of violations that are being addressed under the fee we currently have. See what I'm saying?
I think I understand Representative McCarthy, but as I said, and actually I will email Representative Pierce and see, and just to find out a little bit more why we raised it to 100. It's been several months from the beginning of and then until now.
Well, like I say, he and I have discussed it. That 25 is just like a parking violation. There's two fees on top of it, so effectively the fee is just under 50.
Okay.
But if you go above a certain bar, those incremental fees don't apply. So 100 is really 100. Okay, but again, I mean, the whole point of this is to address the problem.
Yes.
How do we know we're addressing the problem if we don't understand to what extent violations are being addressed at this point under the fine we currently have? Until we understand that, we really can't make an intelligent decision.
It goes back to the enforcement question that Representative Sunman asked for. I think if you're able to get that report and provide that, that would be beneficial.
Absolutely.
Representative Walk?
Hi, Jay Wolk, District 5. I'm agreeing in part with Representative McCarthy's analogy of the fine, being whether it's $100, $25, or $50. If nobody's going to report the person and seeing who's doing it, then it's going to continue. We had, I'll just give you a little I'll make it quick, that in Dogwood Green, where I live, I was the president of the condominium, as some of you know. We had the same issue. I had the police, we were in contact, I believe at the time, with Deputy Chief Liddy. We had, what has to happen to stop it is when it's happening for the most part, and then you have a police car sitting somewhere maybe where they're not seeing, and then they're going to have to enforce it. If the policeman sees the person doing it, they can give a fine and give a ticket to that person. But who's going to tell I mean, I'm not quite sure if anybody's going to come forth and tell somebody, like I said the last meeting, if I see Tom walking his dog, if I'm going to tell on him. So that's where it comes down to. Basically, we're just going around in a circle right now.
I'll tell them.
Especially if it's Tom.
Thank you, Representative Blas. Okay, Representative Polak.
I'm sorry, I had a question about your definition of a service dog. The definition of a service dog, doesn't it go above and beyond what you've described in this ordinance?
According to what it reads right here, a guide or service dog assists a blind, hearing impaired, or mobility impaired or disabled person. I think if you could, Representative McCullough, if you could maybe give more of a description, that would be great, because I think the service
dog, to get on an airline, I
Yes.
have anxiety.
Sure.
Service dog is a service, they can just claim it's a service dog. So how does that help our enforcement to say that this service dog isn't because I'm having anxiety issues? It's not just these three things.
I asked that question in committee, and I can't remember what the answer was, but I know Representative Zezma, who's now on the Board of Finance, did work.
I just wonder if there's a universally.
That's what I wanted to know,
described-
because some people tie a bandana on their dog and bring them to certain places and say it's a service animal, when
Yeah.
it's not necessarily a service animal, they just want to bring their pet along. So I asked how that worked. I think I think her response was there is a definition with the police department. Can you follow up on that and just get back to us?
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Thank you. I don't have a dog, but.
I don't have a dog either.
I was
I have
going
nothing
to-
against dogs, I don't have one.
I was going to, yeah, we shared that. Cats.
We did.
I have a cat. Good cats. Well, it's my understanding, and certainly you're going to follow up on this, but it's my understanding that they're identified similar to having their license, that they have a tag as well that indicates that they're a service dog. But let's just confirm that. And thank you for doing that.
Of course.
So I live on Stilson Road. It's a high pedestrian area. It's very frustrating, let me tell you. I take my dog out, I clean up after her. In fact, she won't go anywhere else except my front lawn, which is even more frustrating. But, you know, it is what it is. But I clean up after her. So I mean, I would talk to anybody if I did see them. And I have seen them, and I have talked with them about that. Like, you need to clean that up. So, yeah, it's my, I'm trying to grow petunias and everything else here. Come on, knock it off. So,
Thank you. Representative Vernon.
Yes, and as a Red Sox fan, I am in no hurry home right now, unlike my Yankee fans, so I apologize for
Oh, Brian, I might actually like
Some of us like the Yankees.
Sorry, the mic's not on.
Go Sox.
I only have one question in 16 parts.
Yes.
So, a lot of us are walking on roads right now, and there's been a reoccurring theme that I've heard about a lack of enforcement, or a desire for greater enforcement, whether it's the removal of dog pieces, whether it's rolling through stop signs, whether it's speed, whether it's parking. So I don't think this issue should be directly addressed with this ordinance, but I would ask this to the body and some of our people that have been here with some historic knowledge. Have we ever discussed potentially including certain types of fine dollars and putting that back into the police budget versus the general fund? I understand that creates a kind of a perverse conflict of interest, but that could also be a potential positive incentive to increase enforcement for things like, rolling through the stop signs and the traffic violations and the dog feces, which I am collectively hearing we would want a greater amount of enforcement, and that would create somewhat of a greater incentive, although it does create a conflict. Is that something that we discussed as a body previously?
Not that I'm aware of, and it's a great topic of discussion that you could take up at the next RTM. It's not on our agenda for this evening. It's not pertinent to this particular ordinance, but I certainly appreciate the fact that you brought it to everybody's attention, and it's something that could definitely be raised in the future for an RTM to consider and discuss. Yes, on the dog ordinance, Representative Pine.
Ron Pine, District 2. I personally don't want our police to, we have a rash of burglaries in town, as you read the paper, my car burglars, people from Waterbury and other towns are having fun in our town, burglarizing and stealing cars. I really don't want our police to concentrate on poop orders, okay? I think if the neighbors, like Representative Dean said, hey, if you see somebody that didn't pick up the feces, nice
See
clothing.
something, say something.
Yeah, talk to everybody, I mean, we're all citizens of
Neighbors.
Fairfield, I'm sure neighborly, and, if someone walks on Stilson Road, you say, hey, really, you have to clean that up.
If there's
Here's the
unattended-
bag.
Right.
Yeah, that's all,
If there's unattended
Really, you just
cases
want
there.
the police to
Yeah.
stake out poopers, that one, come on.
All right, thank you. Anyone else? Representative Perigini.
That's what I promised. Bill Perigini, District 9, just to echo Representative Pine. I'm sympathetic to the feces problem, I mean, really. But I've been working with Chiefs McNamara and Lydia over a host of other issues that are really a real big concern to public safety on Beach Road, Fairfield Beach Road, South Benson Road. There's just not enough police resources. I mean, just the issue is, we do not have the resources to police many of these issues. Rolling through stop signs, speeding. I mean, there's a host of bigger problems. So again, I'm not unsympathetic to this, but we have limited resources, and to Representative Pine's point, we just have to be smart about where the direction is. So thank you.
Understood, but we're really talking about the ordinance, so. All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Seeing nothing else, we will now break into our committees. Thank you, everyone. We stand adjourned at our presentation.
Oh, do you want these cards?